So what would attract them to this? Well, you've got independence. You've got your own space. You've got your own place to put a car. You can get in your car and drive, as we talked about earlier. But you can also use the amenities and the facilities that are available here, and you've got people that are in a demographic that is similar, which obviously that formula works in Florida because you see that everywhere down there. I don't know how many zip codes what's that one down there? The villages. I mean, I think it's like its own state now. But they certainly have a political block going on down there in the villages. But, you know, obviously that attracts people. But then if you need the assistance, you can stay within your community, within your circle of local friends, and move down the street if you need more help. Or if you lose your spouse, you know, and you find that, you know, I just want to be, you know, where there's a little more assistance, you got it. That's the proposal, right?
Yes, it is. And just to share a personal point of view here, my opinion on this whole development is informed by my experience with my father after my mother died. He moved from a single-family residence in Farmington to an independent living condominium also in Farmington. And he stayed there as long as he was able, and the staff said, we need to help you more. Let's move you over into assisted or into independent living in the main building. And he lived there for a few years, and you know that's where he ended his life, except the nursing home. That's where he ended. But he did the transition from a separate independent living facility into the big building, independent living, to assisted living in the big building. And, you know, that was the last 3.5 years of his life.
And that works out very well, because we had relatives who bought in Mercy Bellbrook when those condos were first built. But of course, they did have a nursing home. In the long run, these people ended up going from selling their condo, going to the apartments, and then to assisted living, and ended up in the nursing home before they passed away. But, you know, this I know does not have a nursing home. But people like to plan, a lot of people like to plan the future, and they know what they're going to do. And a lot of them who have children don't live anywhere near here, so their support, our friends, their church, you know, people in the community that they know, and because their kids aren't going to be able to run over there every day to help them out.
Now, I'm going to throw into this a question that came up from the public, but before I ask the applicant for the answer, because I didn't see it spelled out, I want to ask if it's a relevant question for the Planning Commission to consider. The question is, do the residents of this proposed development own or buy their units, or do they rent their units? Is this a leasing situation, or can you buy one of these independent facilities?
You buy anything in this development.
Can you buy anything in here? I mean, but is that a relevant question for us as a Planning Commission, or is that
Well, I think it is,
Sure,
because
yeah.
if you're going to have a lot of rentals, you might attract a different type of individual than if you're going to have people who are going to buy, like in Mercy Bellbrook, you buy your condo. We have
Well,
ownership.
it's still 55 and up, age restricted.
That's right, well, it is there too.
But is that a question that is in the purview of the Planning Commission? I know we all want to weigh in with an opinion on it, but the question is it really relevant here?
We all hope, and let's use the hills of Oakland's development as an example, that when those homes were built, that they were going to be owner occupied. But we have nothing in township rules or regulations that demands that. Are some of those homes or condos currently being rented out? Maybe. I have no personal knowledge of that. Okay, but given this market, there could be some of them now that are being rented by families.
In all neighborhoods, we could have
The
that.
key, though, is how are they being used? They're still being used as single-family homes, whether they're owner-occupied or whether they're being renter occupied or being leasehold occupied. The key is how they're, it's a land use. Okay, so whether this project is owner occupied or long-term lease or rented month to month, the key is that it's, one, it's age restricted and it's used for single-family residential housing purposes as a land use type. Land uses don't go whether they're renter occupied or owner occupied. Okay? Most apartments, because of the nature that they are renter occupied. It's very infrequent that you find any owner occupied apartments. Some of them look like condos. Okay, and that was one of the big hurdles back when the condos were being proposed, is people's images where it looked like an apartment building, because that's their image from in Florida. These tall buildings that were condominiumized that really looked like an apartment building, but they were owner occupied. The key, though, is they're used by a family for residential purposes. And it's the characteristic of the structure, whether it's owner occupied or renter occupied.
Well, let's,
I'm not sure it's a germane question.
okay, but let's go, if you don't mind, I'm gonna press a little further.
That's fine.
I'll make 2 points here. One, you said when the hills of Oakland, or let's say all of the Oaklands
Yeah.
were proposed, and, or for that matter, the crossings, any of those, that the expectation was that it would be mostly people that owned, had mortgages or whatever, or they owned the property, and that was the expectation, the premise that we used. Now, how much of a factor that was in the overall thing, but we didn't have the image that it might be predominantly rentals.
That's right.
They're allowing for the possibility that circumstances could arise where it became that, it'd be a small percentage. So you said we kind of had that vision, but was that vision something that was a factor at the planning commission level on approval for the Oaklands? Could it have been a factor?
It could have been, it may have been in the back of your mind. It wasn't something we talked about, whether this was going to be owner or renter occupied. Because everyone had the assumption, had the unspoken assumption that it was going to be probably owner occupied.
Now let's go to Silver Creek. Silver Creek condos, how big are those things?
You mean each unit?
Yeah, boy, you know, right?
There's the Oakland, which is the townhouse style, or.
No, this is in Silver Creek.
Silver Creek,
Yes,
okay.
The townhouse style within Silver Creek.
Yes, okay.
There's 2 different condominium styles. You have ranch, you have duplexes also, duets. So you have 1,050 square foot carriage units, which are the units over the garages, 2 entryways, up to 1,678 square foot units. So the other ones fall in the range between 1,350 and 1,450 square feet.
So 1,000 to 1,600, and they were sold originally. And now a lot of them may be rentals, right?
Correct.
But they were originally sold as, I guess what I'm getting at is that it may not be a relevant question, but even if it, but if it would help, I mean, should that be a question we throw out here? I haven't asked Dominic yet what his expectation is here, but I know it's a question the public has raised.
I'll give you some facts that in Claremont condominiums, our last 20 certificate of occupancy, the last 20 months constructed, 18 of those have been leased.
Good.
And does that change the characteristic of this township? Does that change anything in regard to Claremont?
Well, I guess that's kind of the point I was trying to dig out of there, is that, I have the sense that certainly the public is interested in the question with regard to this development, not Claremont or anything else, but this development. And I don't know, I sense the other commissioners may have an interest in that. But the point is that if Claremont, if the Silver Creek, which some people might argue Silver Creek isn't in that character of Oakland Township, but you wouldn't argue about Claremont. It is. I mean, that was part of the definition, I suppose. But it doesn't really change anything, does it? It doesn't change anything from a character standpoint, because the character isn't defined by size, perhaps, as much as it is by quality. Quality of construction, layout, design, how this development is utilizing the parcel. So we have a concern about character of the township as it relates to this parcel. And the character of this parcel is presently wooded, wetlands, upland, the view shed along the Adams Road and Dutton corridors. Looking at the proposal, has the character of Oakland Township been maintained as best it could be, or is it altered in such a way that this development does not fit the character of the township?
I think you need to visualize, I go back a little bit to when we had the cemetery put on the corner. Some of you were on the mission end at the corner of Snell and Rochester Road, and we had a lot of people in Oakland Valley and Oakland who didn't want it. They'd rather have 90 houses there, which was real difficult for me to understand because the dead people aren't driving. But anyway.
Some of them apparently are, because I think I followed one on the way here today.
They are on the way in.
You know, that area there, to me, you are going to have, you're not having low-cost housing. You're having something put in there that is a high quality. People who are going to go in there and buy, I'm assuming they'll be buying these duplexes, these things, they're not going to be cheap. They're going to be your professional type of people who are going to buy those. Even if someone buys one and leases it, the rent's not going to be $600 a month. So I think people are saying to me, a lot of people that have talked to me are saying, we don't want some low-cost income housing there because of those big houses around it. I can understand that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't feel that the development that we're talking about is going to be that. It's going to be a quality type of thing, and the people who are going to move in there are going to be people who have had nice homes in Oakland Township. They're too big for them, can't take care of them anymore, the kids are gone, they're going to sell them, move so they can stay in the township, because I think, as I've said before, we've lost some good people who were in the township, people who were on this commission, because there was nowhere for them to move when they couldn't keep their homes anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have to keep all those things in mind, that it's going to be, if it's done, it would be a quality type of development.
Well, the applicant has certainly promised that. But I think it, with no offense to the applicant, I think it's worthy of discussion here, whether we believe that promise to be valid. The applicant has developed a number of neighborhoods in the township. The residents have pointed out that some of those weren't quite finished, and now some of the lots have been turned over to other builders. But the argument that the character of the area was maintained by and large, and the developer has kind of banked on some of that goodwill equity, if you will, in this proposal by saying,
Trust me.
I'm going to do it in the same spirit, the same sense, with what we see in the proposal as far as entrance ways. And while we don't have site plans in front of us yet, we wouldn't see those unless it came back from the township board as approved there. we have a sense of what